There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you by the generosity of our friends with the Haverty family, the Illig family, the Kearney Warnell Foundation, UMB Bank trustee, the Sherman family, the Cockrell family, Kansas City Orthopedic Institute, Don and Mary Doherty, and the Bergman family. Thank you.
Folks, welcome once again to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City. We talk about the people, places, and things that make it such a great place to live. And remember, you can get this podcast anywhere that you get your podcast. And don't forget, we're on YouTube. And I'm going to say that again. Don't forget we're on YouTube, because the guy sitting right across from me right now is using YouTube to his advantage and to Kansas City's advantage. He's been with us before. Kyle Talbot, I call him KC's ambassador. Also moving to Kansas City, a real estate guy. And also now we got KC Scene going for you. And so a lot of this has morphed since the last time we talked. Some people may forget a little bit about your background. Just give us the Reader's Digest version. I know you were born and raised here in Kansas City. It was really a tough time for you when you were a young kid. You had to take care of your mom starting at 11 years old. And you left Kansas City and thought you were never going to come back. But here you are.
Man, you got a good memory. Yeah, you take good notes too. So, no, it's good to be back. So, thanks for having me. When we interviewed over a year and a half ago, I was just getting started. So, things have kind of progressed since then. But yeah, I grew up in Johnson, right around here, Johnson County area, and moved to Denver from 2011 to 2020, and have been back since then. Live in Waldo now. I'm also the honorary mayor of Waldo now. So that should be mentioned until the fall festival. And actually they pushed the fall festival back a month. So usually it's in September. This year it's going to be in October. So I get an extra month of being the honorary mayor of Waldo. So that's pretty exciting. Did you
get a big chain and you have the honorary mayor medallion?
Well, it's pretty funny actually, because George Medina, I don't know if you know who he is. Yeah, he was the first honorary mayor, because they just started this program the previous year, and he has like a little sash, and he got a trophy from the Waldo Business Association, and we did a piece of content, like a little skit where he handed it off to me, and it was a lot of fun. He's a great guy. But afterwards, he asked for it back. And I was talking to the president of the Waldo Business Association. He's like, well, that's actually supposed to be passed down from mayor to mayor. So he's got it probably sitting on a shelf somewhere, So
collecting dust.
Yeah. But
I didn't want you to have it, did he?
I just have the title, I guess.
You also have a new baby. You've added to the family. So
2 months as of yesterday.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, my oldest just turned 18 in March. So it's kind of like starting the full the full cycle over again, which is, lack of sleep is getting to me a little bit. But
see, you're supposed to do all this at one time. You know what I mean? Instead of 18 years later. That's
what I hear.
Yeah, right. So, well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
You and your wife, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, he's doing great. His name's Renan. We got a thing for unique names. So
Then the other two are?
Bankston and Huxley.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So. What's behind the names a little bit?
No. The first name actually, I really liked Kingston, and my wife really liked Banks. Mm-hmm. So we just kind of, combined them. Yeah, right. Yeah. And then Huxley, just, we were sitting in the living room one night, kind of going, it was like 2 months before he was born, and we were just looking at names. I was like, what about Huxley? Yeah. And that one just stuck. And then Renan, we actually used ChatGPT. So
you went AI.
Went AI.
Awesome.
It's funny because we just posted something on my Instagram, which we rebranded recently, and we'll get into that. But we just posted this like Minecraft that we trend jacked. Some other people have done it. It's making turning your city skyline and stuff into a Minecraft scene. Mm-hmm. And so we used AI to do that for Kansas City, and it turned out awesome. I think it was really cool. But the bulk of the comments are just like so opposed to it, because they're just like, post original, this is scraping from other people's content. And, I get that argument. And coincidentally, last year, I was actually on Reddit, just kind of perusing the Kansas City subreddit, because I'm always looking for new stories and stuff going on that I think is really neat and unique to Kansas City. And I found this guy actually built Kansas City in Minecraft in the game. And so we posted that and gave them credit last year. And so I was like, hey guys, we did do that last year if you forgot. But we have a lot of new followers now, so they probably didn't see it.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit of the morphing. I mean, it was moving to KC, the real estate thing. You went YouTube, I think, at that time as well. With I know you were trending there, and then all of a sudden you're at KC Scene, which is a little bit different. We'll talk about the differences here. But you really loved the YouTube from the beginning. I remember you talking about you're obsessed with YouTube, and you started to use that. So talk a little bit about that, and then morphing into what has become KC Scene, and I call you KC's ambassador because you have stories about things that are happening in Kansas City as far as development's concerned. Riverfront and everywhere, along the KC streetcar line. Is there development there? Where are the best neighborhoods, to buy a new home, and where can people afford or not? But just talk a little bit about morphing from the YouTube, and I know you still do YouTube, and you're huge at YouTube, but going to KC Scene as well.
Yeah. So, this all started out as a marketing effort for my real estate business, right, to get clients. And
Sure.
and YouTube to this day is still our number one source of new clients. So people who are moving to Kansas City, Google that, right? And if you Google that right now, we occupy pretty much all of the YouTube space on the front page. And so that's how a lot of people find us. And then, the cool thing is like, I've been in sales for 20 years. I've owned a roofing company. I got into kind of the real estate game a little bit late. November 2022 is when I finally got licensed. And then once I got licensed, I was like, man, I feel like I was made for this, right? Like
I finally found my niche.
Yeah, all of the things that I've done career-wise, from construction and remodeling to sales, I mean, this is the perfect, combination of all those skill sets. And so the one thing when you get into real estate, if you're going to do it full time, right? Because a lot of people get into it and they're like, I'll sell a house every year or something like that. But me, I've been commission based most of my career, and so that was nothing new. And I was just like, the number one thing you need to find is your niche. But secondary to that, and probably the more important thing, is how are you going to generate business? Now, a lot of people do that with like their sphere of influence, or, their what we call our database, right? Like working, friends, family, just making sure you're top of mind as a real estate professional. But for me, somebody who lived in Denver for almost a decade and then coming back, I didn't really have that like long list of people here locally that, all my friends had kind of moved. And so, I had to do something different. And that's where social media came into play. And so it started kind of with Instagram and YouTube at the same time simultaneously, but that's where moving to KC came from. And so as a byproduct of that, I just kind of named my Instagram account Moving to KC, just to kind of keep it cohesive with the branding. And now my real estate team, because we've grown considerably, is called Moving to KC. So I have 3 agents, a director of operations, a business operations manager, a transaction coordinator, a full-time VA. And so, that is our core business. That's where we get, all the revenue for, both companies comes from that pretty much right now. But over time, it's kind of like evolved. So, moving to KC, the YouTube channel used to be all relocation. Now it's a blend of, 75% relocation. So if you're looking to move here, it's still an excellent resource for that. But every month we put out a long form video on a development, because I noticed that that's something that people are super interested in, right? And so people want to know what's going on with, the billions of dollars in projects that are taking place across the city. And so I just kind of leaned into that, right? So 2 weeks ago, we did Berkeley Riverfront. It's a 17-minute video just on that project, right? So if you want to know everything about the future of the riverfront, go watch that video. You'll know so much, like, and a ton of research goes into that, right? So to your point, we're providing a lot of value, but in order to provide that value, I'm doing a ton of research. We're scraping, city websites for permits, and
you're going to all the meetings. I mean, you're going to city council meetings. You're doing the chamber of commerce meetings.
We do those virtually. It's hard for me. Like I try to go to like groundbreakings, and if I'm not there personally, I'll send my videographer and photographer down so we can get some content for it and post it. So it kind of seems like I'm in a lot of places at once. But really, I've built an excellent team behind me. Right. And so, on Instagram, how I got big was I realized, again, with the development side, that people had a desire to know more about that. So I leaned into that. I was doing a lot of that type of content, just short form videos on developments. I remember the first one we did was actually on CPKC Stadium when they released the renderings like 2.5 years ago. And that video ended up getting like 80,000 views. And so at the time I was just like, okay, people want this, so let's just do that. And so we weren't as consistent as we are today, because I really just stopped doing everything else and only did like reels on developments, and maybe it was one, maybe it was two a week, but they always performed well. Well, over time, it's evolved. We've gone from just doing development type content to, I always say, like, again, you call me Kansas City's ambassador. Mm-hmm. I actually interviewed the mayor about a year ago, and I had him.
I saw that.
I had him designate me as the hype man of Kansas City. There you go. And so it's like what I feel like is missing from my algorithm is, we call it doom scrolling, right? You start scrolling, you see all this like negative headlines and negative news. And I was like, I just want to report on the cool and good stuff, the things that I'm interested in Kansas City, the events, the entertainment, the things that are coming here, what makes Kansas City unique. There's something about Kansas City, right? And so, that's our niche, really. And so over the last year, that account has grown from, I think the last time we sat down, it had like 20,000 followers, so now it's at 83,000. And it's just become like a full-on media company, right? Like I run into people all the time. They're just like, I get all my news from you. And so I heard...
Especially about that kind of stuff, about the positivity.
Mm-hmm.
You go on the news now, you just go... you go to bed depressed if you're watching the 10 o'clock news.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And we look through all those news stories to filter out the good stuff, right? And now we're on media lists with the cities, and so we get a lot of sourced information that we're not.
They let you know first.
Yeah, well, along with the other local news sources.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a thing that we've moved into, but. The rebrand has been a long time coming. Moving to KC is still, we actually created a secondary account. And the idea behind it is when I sat down and I started to look at my analytics on my Instagram page, the development videos that actually helped me build my original core audience were performing the worst out of all of my content. And, that's the content that I like to produce the most. And so the idea was like, let's let KC continue to evolve and do its thing. And let's really get back to our core values with moving to KC, which is development and real estate. And I think the one thing that has been confusing to people is like moving to KC, I'll go down to the First Fridays and people are like, oh, you're the moving to KC guy, which I think is great. But they're like, what do you do? Are you
a real estate guy, or are you on the I always want to say the KC, not live, but just Kansas City's umbrella of, hey, here's our city. This is a great thing. Yeah. One of those deals.
Yeah. So, it's about letting Kansas City Scene, which is the media company that feeds a lot of our real estate business, continue to evolve and do its own thing. We actually have a weekly newsletter right now. We have about 2,500 subscribers for that. And kind of the idea with the KC Scene is newsletter will be part of it. So we're going to continue to grow that. There will be opportunities with local businesses to sponsor that newsletter, to advertise within that. But it also, because they're separate entities now, things like legality, right? Like if I get sued for my real estate business and now my content business, they're all under one umbrella, that's a risk. So it's kind of a segregation of those two things. But at the same time, it gives us the ability to not have to market under the rules and regulations that we have as real estate agents. Like as a real estate professional, I have to abide by all these certain rules to market. Like I have to have my brokerage logo and all of, anything that we send out. So it kind of, frees us from that. Mm-hmm. But then moving to KC will also always have a place in that newsletter, right? And that we can, include our brokerage and, all that stuff. So, it's it's constantly evolving. I mean, we're literally, yesterday I sat down with my business operations manager who's been with me for 6 weeks now. And, we've done so much in the first 6 weeks of her being on board. And, it's exciting. We're just sitting down and kind of like envisioning what the future looks like. And really my goal is, and always has been, is I just want to make some of the best content about Kansas City for people who live in Kansas City. Yeah. That is my goal, right? And I think through that and delivering that value to people, we benefit, right? Yeah. Because people see that and they see the authenticity of like, this guy is genuinely excited about the things that are going on in Kansas City. I'm going to sell my house. You know what? I want this guy to sell it. Yeah. And that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, because he loves Kansas City like we do.
Yeah.
And the other deal, I think part of it in the beginning, now I could be mistaken, you can correct me, but as you first started doing this, I think you were looking, it says moving to Kansas City, meaning if you're in Denver, you're in Boston, you're in New York, you're in Atlanta, here are some things to tell you about Kansas City you probably don't know. Because here you're frequently asked questions about what's there to do in Kansas City?
Yeah.
What's going on? I know we've gotten more hype now because of the draft and the Royals championship and then the Chiefs and the Super Bowls and all those other, and World Cup coming, of course. But the deal was, I think a lot of the content at that point was, Kansas City's a pretty cool place. Here's some things to do.
Yeah.
Okay. And then all of a sudden it's become something for the people of Kansas City that you can't see the forest for the trees. The Toy Miniature Museum, hey, Union Station's having this week. The World War I Museum's doing this, that sort of thing. I think that's the way it originally started for you, and then has, blossomed into what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's always been kind of part of it, especially on Instagram. The YouTube channel has, again, it kind of was like, here are pros and cons of moving to Kansas City.
Sure, yeah.
We
hear pros and cons about Kansas City. Yes,
right,
absolutely.
right. And it's like, hey, if you're moving to the city, like you should know that crime is something that you need to consider. So, here's a resource. Go check that out. Like if you're moving from a coastal area and you're used to mountains or the ocean, like we're landlocked. We don't have that kind of stuff, So that's kind of how the YouTube channel started. Instagram, yeah, to your point, like on every Friday we post, here are our top, 6 to 8 picks of things that are going on this weekend in Kansas City. And I get people all the time, they're like, that's why I come to your page, because it's like if I'm looking for something. And the reason where that came from is like I always found myself on the weekends like Googling what's going on this weekend in Kansas City because, I'm looking for something for my family and I to do. And so just kind of making that more accessible and easier all in one place for somebody to find. And then if you subscribe to our newsletter, we go a little more in depth over there with like links and we do a list of concerts that, are taking place throughout the week. And what we found is like those are the most clicked links in our entire newsletter. And so again, it goes back to just providing value to people. Like what are people after? What are they looking to consume? And then just making it like super easy for them.
Yeah, right. And to know where to go.
Yeah.
And since you're building your brand and your name and the whole thing, that's where they go. Because people get stuck in a rut too.
Yeah.
Go same place to dinner.
Yeah.
We go the same place for this. We go the same place for that. Let's find out some different things to do. And most of those things are easy to get to. I mean, this isn't spread out where it takes an hour and a half to get from the north part of the city to the south part, unless you're traveling on 69 sometimes. That's another story. Yeah. That'll all be fixed eventually. Okay, so we can go from there. But that's all part of it, right? It really has more. Have you ever thought about maybe this real estate thing? But I know it is the revenue that drives and helps everything else. Maybe I give my agents, my 3 new agents, all that, and then I go over here and do the stuff that I really love to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's the goal. I'm my end goal is to not do real estate at all. It's just maybe take on a few listings here and there.
Yeah, sure.
But that's kind of what we're doing, right? That's why I have 3 agents on my team right now. Is because in order to produce the amount of content that we're producing, because a lot of it, like I'm the bottleneck. It comes through me. I have to sit down in front of my camera. I have to, script it all out. I got to do the research. I got to sit down and film it. That is an incredible amount of time and energy that it takes to do that. And, what I was finding is as my real estate business started to scale, it was kind of taken away from that, right? Like, and then I wasn't providing the level of service to the clients because I was kind of torn in 2 different directions. It's like on the one hand, this is how you found me, right? Like you found me because I make this, what I think is really good content, but I can't go show you 24 houses,
No, exactly.
and so it started to become, more of a needs-based thing where it's like, okay, I need some help. And so to your point, absolutely the goal is like my vision is to just be doing content full time. Right. And then all of the real estate business will go down to the team and they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, right. And you always said you're not a hard sell guy anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what I mean? You that just isn't your personality to be a hard sell guy. And I think the other thing is you not only show them the houses, okay, and their price range or whatever they've got, their criteria or whatever they have, but you also then now you can go out and show them the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you've rated your neighborhoods from S to D, I think it is, and you rate the neighborhoods. You're very honest about what you can get in this neighborhood and what you can't, and the pros and cons of every neighborhood. I think that content is probably really helpful and makes people feel better about dealing with you than they would maybe somewhere else that's just I'm trying to sell my house. I'm going to sell my house, instead of wanting to have a customer for life.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, no, I mean, it just goes back to delivering high value, right? Like, because when literally the first thing that anybody ever says in an email, a text message, or a phone call when they are watching my YouTube channel and then they finally decide, hey, it's time, we're going to reach out to them. I've been watching your channel. Your videos have been so helpful. Like literally I could go back and show you dozens of emails and text messages where that is the first sentence that comes out of their mouth. And, you got to think about it. It's like by that time, they've usually watched hours of my content because my videos on average on YouTube are 15 minutes long. Right. And so I have 83 videos. So if you sit down on a weekend and you watch, a dozen of them, you've been watching me for, 2 or 3 hours.
And you're going to know everything about Kansas City.
Yeah, you're going to have a really great insight to it, right? Everything from like the new developments that are coming to town to your point, what are the best and worst neighborhoods. And so, and by that point is like, it's not a matter of if they want to work with us. They've already made up their mind. Now we just have to, have a system in place to make sure that we are serving them to the best of our ability. And that's really where kind of building in these better systems and having the people in place to make sure it's like, I have an agent right now that is working with a client that we've written 7 offers. We've lost every single one because that's how competitive the market is where they're looking. And it's just like, I don't have the capacity to show you that many houses and write that many offers and still be able to put out a video every week on YouTube, which is the value add, right? How people are finding us in the first place. And so, and that has been very, methodical in how we've kind of transitioned that. And in my videos, if you watch them now, I mention the team a lot and I say, hey, reach out. The team is here and we'd love to help you. And so a lot of people reach out, they have the expectation that, hey, we're not going to get to work with Kyle. We're going to get to work with his team. But at the same time, relocation is what we do, and we do it really well. Yeah. And so if you're moving to Kansas City and you want, like half of the people that we sold houses to last year, they bought them without ever seeing them.
Yeah.
And that is a lot of trust to put into, to buy a house from California and, just buy it from purely us walking through and doing a video tour. I mean, we've got to be doing something right because, those people end up incredibly happy. So it's very rewarding.
Right. Now you moved back here from Denver in 2020. How much has your viewpoint shifted or your mindset shifted from 2020 to today on Kansas City?
I'm more excited today than I was in 2020. I think in 2020 when we came back, I still kind of had that Kansas City's where I grew up. It's where I was from.
And you had bad memories.
Yeah. I never
a lot of drama.
Never really envisioned myself coming back here. But we ended up in Brookside in an incredible neighborhood. And fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of part of what led to all of this is, I moved back, I fell in love with the city and all over again in a completely different way. Seeing, honestly seeing all of the development now, it's not just seeing it and reporting on it, it's I'm meeting with people who are behind the scenes making it happen, right? Because I've kind of established this name for myself in Kansas City to where, I interviewed the mayor, a year and a half ago. I just went down to the annual luncheon for downtown Kansas City, and it was where they named the South Loop project Roy Blunt Luminary Park.
Yeah.
So it's cool. I'm, now that I'm so entrenched in it, it's just more exciting.
Yeah. So what's your biggest, and we'll talk about future things that are coming that I know you're way ahead of most people and you're way ahead in the curve. Well, what are some of the things I'm sure, the CPKC Park and all those sort of things are really big. Well, what's maybe the biggest thing that's happened since you've been here before we start talking about what's going to come down in the future? I know there's probably a couple things on that list. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing that's happened since I've come here is CPKC Stadium.
Okay.
I mean, because that is brand new. Last year was the first year, right? And it sold out. News. It sold out every single game. And now we have a women's rugby match coming here. I mean, it has put Kansas City on the map for women's sports in an incredible way. So I think it's hard to argue that there's been anything that has meant more for Kansas City than CPKC Stadium.
Especially for development of that area as well.
Yeah, and now, it's bleeding into, a 10-year, $1 billion riverfront development that's going to completely transform the riverfront and give Kansas City access to its river, right? Where it's like we've been so disconnected from the river. And that's what that video that I did a couple of weeks ago is all about. It's like the river was how Kansas City was born, right?
Without the river, there is no Kansas City.
Without the river, there is no Kansas City. But after the floods, we built levees, we walled ourselves off from the river, and we moved downtown up away from it. And since then, we haven't had access to it. And so you look at other areas like a San Antonio and their river walk, right? And that's kind of what I'm hopeful for in Kansas City is having that kind of access to our river in a way that we've never experienced before. Yeah. So, I think again, it's hard to argue that. And then the secondary one I would say is the streetcar extension, because they're extending it to Berkeley Riverfront Park, right? Mm-hmm. So not only are they building all of these awesome things there, but we'll be able to access it with public transportation. But it's going to spark all of this. It's already sparked all of this development from Midtown down to the Plaza, right? Like I think you got to step back and take a look at, Ray Washburn and HP Village Partners. They just purchased the Plaza for, $175 million or whatever it was last year. And they may not have made that purchase without the streetcar line, right? Because I think that's how impactful having that transportation and access to downtown and the rest of the city is going to mean for the city.
Yeah, right. And they have to change the image of the Plaza as well. Mm-hmm. The Plaza got terrible image. Had for a long time. They're getting their own private security in there and the whole thing. And that's going to be important for them, for people to step off of that streetcar and go to and stop at the Plaza, right?
Yeah. Now, and they've mentioned in every single one of their press conferences, and I went to the initial. I was actually invited to the initial press conference after the purchase, and it was funny because it was the first time I was in an environment like that. And I'm looking around and I see all these media people with their, on the shoulder cameras, and I have my little tripod with my phone. And I literally sat right up in the front row in front of everybody because I was like kind of pushed out to the sides. I was like, you know what? I don't have this bulky camera. I sat on the floor and I set my tripod up and I hit live stream on Instagram and I live streamed the whole thing. And honestly, like, my followers were like, "Thank you so much for doing this. Like we wouldn't have seen it otherwise, right?" And so again, I think it's kind of bridging that that gap from legacy media to the way people consume content today is all social media, right? And so just making that more available for them. But yeah, I mean the guys over at HP Village, if you've looked at what they've done over in Dallas, I mean it is really exciting. And I know people are like, well, this purchase has been almost a year, since they made it, and what progress has been made, and I think things like this just take time. I mean, and they've said from the beginning that the priority is security and infrastructure, and those are the non-sexy things, right?
Sure.
Those are the things that we don't really pay attention to or, see as like, wow, there's so much progress being made. I think the best is yet to come for the plaza, and frankly, I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think where's one area we could do a better job? What is the one area where you think in the years to come that they will definitely do a better job? Now, a lot of it might have to do with where the ballpark's going, which we don't know yet, okay, as of this date, where the Royals are going to be and where the Chiefs are going to be. And that's going to be big for wherever they end up, okay? That's going to be part of a totally big project in both cases. So that we're probably waiting to see there a little bit. Where can we do a better job?
The east side. I mean, I don't think there's any other answer other than the east side, right? It's been so disinvested in, cut off from 71 highway, but we're starting to see that, right? Where they're doing a study right now to reconnect the east side, which is a $5 million study on how can we undo some of the damage that we did by building that highway. Right. And I think something that's interesting is I was reading a piece that actually the Kansas City Star put out in collaboration with the public library. And that highway was originally supposed to be built from the plaza through Brookside. And the people in Brookside and the Country Club District came out in droves, and they were like, no, you're not going to build a highway through our community. Yeah, right. And so they said, okay, we'll build it over here. And that did a lot of damage. So I think the east side is somewhat, and you listen to any time that Quentin Lucas, he grew up on the east side, when he's talking about development, that's been a goal of his, is how can we, reconnect that area. And I think we are seeing, it's slower than I'd like to see, but, development and things like this do take a lot of time. So there's another project going on that I believe they just reallocated some funds to, which is the South Point project. It's going to be right there at 63rd and Parallel Parkway. And so that'll be huge because it's going to be a grocery store. It's going to be retail and apartments and housing, and those are the types of projects that we need over there. Yeah,
because it is a food desert. Yep. It's always been known. They just had a grocery store closed down, I believe.
Yeah.
Because of all the vandalism and crime in that area. And it's heartbreaking because, real people live there. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, there's real people, good people who live in that area that deserve better. And I think that'd still be a great place for the ballpark.
Yeah.
I think for the baseball stadium. And I really do think John Sherman wants to be in the downtown part of the area. The Overland Park thing, I'm just going, what? What?
Yeah.
I have to escape the stadium on Knoll or Row or on Metcalf? I don't think so.
It's so counter to everything that he said publicly that he wants. So I don't think that Overland Park is a contender, nor was it ever contender. No. I think those were just rumors. I think with the new legislation that the state of Missouri just passed to kind of compete with the Star Bond bills on the Kansas side. And then Clay County is coming back into the mix, and they just passed some.
They're banging their drum pretty loud.
And that was, if we remember back to the original plan, it was between the East Village and North Kansas City.
Right.
And so East Village, for whatever reason, they've made their case, and I think they've drawn their line in the sand that it's not going to go there, which is unfortunate because I think it would be a great place for a ballpark. The North Loop is also another interesting spot, but I think North Kansas City honestly has a shot, and I think it would be a huge loss for Jackson County personally.
Yeah, be a huge loss. Yeah. And they not only want the baseball stadium, they also want the Chiefs practice facility in Clay County. So that would both really hurt Jackson County. That's for sure. Revenue and everything else. So what do you see happening? Yeah, and
honestly, I hope nothing ever happens with the stadiums because it's just an endless amount of content for me to report on. Like literally, people in my comments
are
those
like, guys.
Yeah, people in my comments are just like, man, like we're still talking about the stadium stuff 2 years later. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see the Chiefs stay at Arrowhead and the Royals end up downtown. That's what I've always wanted. Yet I voted against the 3/8 cent sales tax when it was proposed in April of 2024 because they didn't have a good plan for the crossroads, and so Washington Park has been something that's been proposed. I think that would be an excellent option if you think about it. Like that is where the city comes together, right? Is Crown Center, Union Station, World War I museum.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. That's a tongue twister, but I think a ballpark makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah.
And you have the streetcar line, and so people talk about parking. It's so funny. Like, you mention anything about downtown baseball, and the first comment I always get is about parking. Mm-hmm. And I think Kansas Citians just got to get over it, right? Like, we are building a more robust public transportation infrastructure, and so you don't need all of the parking spots downtown. And I get it; we're used to this vast amount of parking at the K, which is amazing.
And they
for
still
tailgating.
complain about that as well.
Yeah,
they're talking to the Chiefs fans.
Yeah,
he's talking about getting an hour and a half to get out of there.
So going back to like, I would love to see the area around Arrowhead and the Truman Sports Complex get developed, right? Like, I would love to see some investment in there. Yeah. I think it's going to be hard to top what Kansas is offering. And there have been some things that the Hunt family has mentioned about wanting to bring a Super Bowl to Kansas City and having a dome that leads me to believe that Kansas is a serious contender and landing spot for them. I think there's no way that the Chiefs leave Kansas City, and hopefully there's no way that the Royals would do that either. I mean, they'd have to completely rebuild their fan base, and why would you do that when you have a loyal fan base here? But listen, I get, if you look at the Royals' attendance, we rank in the bottom third every year.
Right.
Even last year when the team was good, we still ranked in the bottom third for attendance because the K is it is a whole thing to go to the K for a game.
Yeah,
and it's an amazing experience. It's a phenomenal ballpark. I love it. But a lot of people just opt out of it because it's like, I got to drive, I got to, pay for parking. It's going to consume my entire day to go to a game out there. And I think at the root of the argument for moving it downtown is it becomes more of a casual, hey, I'm downtown, let's just pop over to the Royals are playing the game.
Game starts at 6:40. Yeah. I get off work at 5. I'll do a little extra work and just walk from my office building to the ballpark.
Yeah, and I think just by moving it downtown, that attendance issue goes away. And so that's my argument for a downtown ballpark. And so when you consider something like Overland Park or the Legends, like, it makes zero sense to me.
Yeah.
If the goal is to increase attendance and have downtown baseball, then you build it downtown. Now, I think there is an argument to be made for North Kansas City as well, because it is an urban-ish area, right? It's technically a suburb, I would say, but it still has that walkability. It still has accessibility.
You still see the skyline of Kansas City in the backdrop.
Yeah, so I think that, we'll see what happens. But, I hope the Royals find a solution and we can move on. The reality is there's going to be a whole lot to report on after the decision's made too. So, I kind of partially said that in joking, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think, hopefully we'll have a decision here soon and then we can kind of move on to the next thing.
Sort of move forward. Give me something that's on the horizon for us that we might not know a whole lot about that you are excited about. And I know you pump stuff out every week, so you're really up to date on it. But there might be something out there that, you're seeing, you're going, I've heard a little bit. I've heard little rumors about this, that, or the other thing.
Not necessarily rumors. I mean, this is pretty much out in the open, but the West Bottoms redevelopment is going to be amazing. So Samara Road, they're a developer out of New York, and they're spending half a billion dollars in redeveloping the West Bottoms, which is one of my favorite places to go in all of Kansas City. So I'll be actually doing a long-form video on my YouTube channel soon on that development. And so that's kind of top of mind for me right now. I think you've had the folks out here on the Panasonic plant. That's going to be huge. The Google data center up north, I think is another big thing for Kansas City. It's a tech hub. And then there was mention of, and it's kind of been quiet since, but the KC Star building, which was going to be the location for the Royal Stadium, they're going to spend $1 billion in renovating that and redeveloping it into a data center as well. So, you kind of see some of those things. There's a $12 billion data center that's been proposed out towards the Legends, and then all of the development that's going out on out in the Legends, the Margaritaville Hotel.
Yeah.
The Buc-ee's that's coming. I'm super excited about.
Buc-ee's.
Yeah, I'm super excited about
Prepare
Buc-ee's.
to spend your day in Buc-ee's. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. but it'll be cool because it's out by the Speedway.
Yeah.
And so you'll have Buc-ee's, you'll have the Margaritaville Hotel, and then Atlas 9. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's an immersive museum. And that one is something that is kind of flew under the radar a little bit. That is part of this home field development out by the Legends. That is going to be a really cool experience as well, and a great addition to Kansas City. So.
Right. We had Lindsay Patterson Smith, and she talked about the American Royal and that whole complex.
Now listen to that
well.
one. Yeah.
So that's really and then the West Bottoms, for people who haven't been there recently. Okay, Sarah and I went just recently and went to the Golden Ox, and I haven't been to Golden Ox forever.
No.
And you're wondering, well, where are they? And all of a sudden we go to the parking lot, and there's a giant complex back there that it's housing.
Yeah.
It's apartments, it's whatever back there. Then they have the winery down there, and they have all kinds of other stuff, let alone they haven't even really gotten started when you talk about the West Bottom. So it is really going to explode, isn't it?
Yeah, that apartment complex isn't even part of the redevelopment plan for the West Bottom. So that that's it's near completed, and so that'll be an awesome addition. And again, when we go back to talking about Berkeley Riverfront and accessing the waterfront, right? West Bottoms was the original downtown of Kansas City.
Yeah,
but after the flooding and all that stuff, it kind of became this forgotten
Union
wasteland.
Station was.
Yeah, exactly, and beautiful, by the way. I wish we still had that station because it was just a beautiful piece of architecture, and that's a whole other conversation about buildings that we've gotten rid of over our history.
That's one of the reasons you moved here. You loved the architecture here, and you were into the building and the whole thing for it.
Yeah. So that's why I loved living in like that part of town, that South KC, Brookside area, is because it's just like when I lived in Denver, the architecture there is so boring. It's like 60s style brick ranches everywhere. There's one tiny little pocket of historic homes. Kansas City, we're spoiled. I get it. We got rid of some really cool buildings, but we still have a lot of really cool architecture here. And I think that's something that makes the city unique.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And you have expanded your family, so now you and your wife are talking about relocating as well, right? So you might have to put your group into finding you a new house, right?
Yeah.
In the area?
Well, we haven't quite decided on. And actually, if you want to.
I know you're going to wait until you're no longer the honorary mayor of Waldo.
Yeah,
okay, before you move.
For sure. And the cool thing is my office is in Waldo, so I'll always have a tie to Waldo no matter what.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going back and forth. The school bond passing for KCPS was huge because we have kiddos in the public school system, and so to see the overwhelming yes vote come out is like this is a change. In Kansas City,
it's 80%
over
20%,
85 to 15. It's over 60 years in the making, and one of the things that Kansas City Public Schools lacks is a great middle school option, and part of this they've said they're going to convert Southwest High School into a middle school. Right. So and my kids are young enough to where that'll be completed in time for them to feed into that. Sure. So. I don't know what the future holds. All I know is we need a bigger house, and our house that we have is a little too small for all of the kids that we have. So
okay, and just one aside before we, and we're going to have you in again, of course, as we go forward. But just one other thing, young couple, affordability, where?
Oh man, I think
some of the older people,
on.
They have money and they've already had a house, so they can morph this house into a new house or whatever. But
I think Raytown, Independence, Grandview. When I was growing up, those are areas that we avoided.
Right.
There's been a lot of great investment in those areas and their downtown specifically. And Independence Square is amazing. Yeah. Like the Hallmark movie that just came out last year.
Where it was filmed.
A lot of it was filmed down there. And a buddy of mine lives in Independence, and we both grew up in Johnson County. And when we were growing up, it was like, don't go to Independence. I think if I were a first-time home buyer, that's where I would look, because you can still get a house for $150,000.
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, it may not be where you want to live forever, but that's not the point of getting into owning a home, right? As a first-time home buyer,
it's the equity.
It's to get out of the rat race of paying somebody else's mortgage, start paying down your own mortgage, and then the power in that 3, 4, 5 years later, you have $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in equity because you've got appreciation, coupled with loan pay down, you parlay that into a down payment for a nicer house in the area that you want to live. And that's the recipe, right? Nobody buys their first house in Brookside. Right. It's just not the reality. And the
or in Leawood.
Well, definitely not Leawood. We would love to live in Leawood. I don't even think we could move there if we wanted to. But yeah, I think, those are great options. There's some great spots in KCK. I think it depends on what side of the state line you want to be in. I really love Mission on the Kansas side. There are some spots in Old Overland Park that you can still get a deal. But granted, what you can get for $150,000 in Independence is going to cost you $250,000 plus in Overland Park. So if you don't have kids, you're not planning on having kids, and you're just looking for, let's get into our first house and own something, right? Get that sweat equity, do a little bit of renovation, get the low pay down and the appreciation. I love those areas. I think they're going to be great for first-time home buyers.
Well, you're a wealth of information. I know everybody will go to Moving to KC. If you're moving to KC or want to know, or even if you're here and you want to move to a different part.
Yep.
If you're from out of town, moving to KC, go. And then also KC Scene, which will tell you all the latest and greatest things that are happening in Kansas City, because as we always say, there's just something about Kansas City.
There is something about Kansas City.
You're one of those people. I appreciate it, Kyle. Best of luck to you, your family, and the whole deal. And thanks for joining us again. And we'll have you in again. You'll be
My
back.
pleasure. Yeah, right. Thanks for having me.
All right.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is being made possible by the generous support of local partners like you. You can help us share these stories by becoming a sponsor today. Visit somethingaboutKC.org to learn more.